For a long time, if you wanted to look like you had the best weed in the room, it pretty much had to be one specific color, and that color was purple. Purple weed meant premium. The kind of thing rappers name-dropped in their songs, and dealers charged extra for. Now, a lot of different purple strains came out of that time, but one of the most legendary came out of Oakland, California, Purple Kush. But here's the thing most people never realized. Purple weed was never actually any stronger than regular weed. The color was basically just for show, and somehow that color alone had people paying double for the exact same high. So to understand how a whole generation got obsessed with the color of their weed, Purple Kush is one of the strains you have to start with. So let's start with what Purple Kush actually is. At its core, it's a pure indica, a cross between two old-school heavyweights, Hindu Kush and Purple Afghani. When you put those two together, you get a strain that's built for pretty much one thing, and that's flattening you into the couch. But a strain like this didn't just appear out of nowhere. It came from somewhere with real history, and that somewhere was Oakland, California, specifically a stretch of downtown that became known as Oaksterdam, one of the oldest and most important medical cannabis areas in the entire country. This was in the era following California's Proposition 215 in 1996, when medical marijuana dispensaries were first becoming legal and establishing the foundation for today's cannabis industry. Now the exact date is a little fuzzy, and you'll hear that a lot with old strains, because nobody in the underground was keeping clean records back then. But the most reliable accounts, including from longtime breeder and cannabis historian Todd McCormick, trace circulating cuts of Purple Kush back to the mid-1990s in the Bay Area. And it didn't take long for that craze to hit. Those same Afghan genetics that gave Purple Kush its kick were quietly showing up in strain after strain coming out of Northern California, because those thick, resinous Afghan plants carried a hidden trait: the ability to turn purple. Growers spent the 80s and the 90s refining it, and one by one, the legends started to arrive. There was Mendocino Purps, a clone-only strain out of Mendocino County that landed on High Times' top 10 strains of the year in 2007. There was Purple Urkel, a famous version of Mendo Purps named after the character Steve Urkel. But the one that really turned purple into a phenomenon showed up in 2003 when a Bay Area grower named Ken Estes introduced Granddaddy Purple. Granddaddy Purple had something the older purples did not, and that was real commercial yields, which meant dispensaries could actually keep it in stock. Which brings us right back to the big question from the start. If everybody was paying a premium for purple, was purple weed actually any better? And the answer is no, not even a little. That purple color comes from a group of pigments called anthocyanins, and if that word sounds familiar, it is because they are the exact same compounds that make blueberries blue, eggplants purple, and red cabbage red. It has nothing to do with THC. For a plant to actually turn purple, two things have to line up. First, it needs the genetics for it, which is that Afghan trait we just talked about. And second, it needs cold nighttime temperatures late in the flowering stage. When it gets cold, it causes the plant to slow down on chlorophyll, which is the green pigment, which lets the purple that was underneath come out. It is the same exact reason leaves change color in the fall. So here is the part that breaks the whole myth. The color and the potency are made through two completely separate processes in the plant. One has nothing to do with the other. A purple bud can be weak, and a plain green bud can be incredibly strong. Okay, so back to Purple Kush itself, because even with that myth cleared up, this was still a genuinely respected strain. The buds are dense and chunky, coated in resin, with those deep violet and green colors broken up by little orange hairs. It's the kind of weed that just looks expensive sitting in a jar. The smell and the taste are classic old-school Afghani, earthy and musky, almost like sandalwood up front, with a sweet grape and berry note underneath, and it finishes sweet, almost like grape candy. The effects are exactly what you would expect from a pure indica like this. A heavy, fast-hitting body high that pretty much glues you to the couch, driven primarily by high levels of myrcene and caryophyllene terpenes that create that classic sedative indica experience. It's a true nighttime strain, the kind of thing people reach for to deal with pain, stress, or trouble sleeping. The THC usually lands somewhere in the high teens to mid-20s, so it's strong, but not because it's purple. In 2016, High Times named Purple Kush one of its top 10 Kush strains, putting it right next to legends like OG Kush. So this was never just a pretty face. It was a legitimately great strain that happened to also be purple. Somewhere along the way, purple stopped being just a color and turned into a status symbol. On the street, calling your weed perp was basically like saying you got the good stuff, and the hip-hop industry loved it. Juicy J literally dropped a song called Purple Kush back in 2009, and Cameron named an entire album Purple Haze. Words like perp and purple haze got woven into rap as code for premium weed, and that put the color in front of millions of people who would never once set foot in a California dispensary. And honestly, it makes total sense why purple weed took over. In a world where almost all of the weed is some shade of green, a deep purple bud just stops you in your tracks because it looks rare, it looks expensive, and it looks like it has to be better, even though we know it is not. And that one visual effect is exactly what made purple weed the perfect thing to show off and photograph. And that idea of weed you show off and photograph never actually went away. It just evolved. As the Cookies family took over cannabis in the 2010s, breeders started crossing those genetics into the purples, and the purple bloodline kept pumping out hits. Granddaddy Purple got crossed into Cookies family strains like Cherry Pie and Candyland. It became a parent of Purple Punch. Then came the candy era. Runts, which dropped in 2017 and was named Leafly's Strain of the Year in 2020, brought those bright, frosty, purple-tinted buds to a whole new generation, and it spun off to its own purple version called Purple Runts. So if you walk into a dispensary today and see all those vivid, colorful, purple-accented exotic strains lining the menu and filling up Instagram, that is nothing new. That is the direct descendant of the obsession that Purple Kush and Granddaddy Purple helped kick off decades ago. The packaging got fancier and the names got sweeter, but it is the exact same obsession underneath.